Hello, everyone, and welcome to Aucademy. I'm Katie Munday. Today, I'm joined by Sam Harris, Raven Cochrane. I hope I'm saying that right. Cochrane, and Niki as well. And we're talking about depathologizing the language around attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. So before we get started, if we could do a kind of physical description of ourselves for anyone who might want or need that at home, that'd be perfect. And then a little bit about yourselves. If you're involved in kind of anything on social media or anything like that, feel free to put your handle in there as well if you'd like. So I'll start first and then we'll go for Sam just because he happens to be next to me on my computer. So my name is Katie Munday. I use they, them pronouns. I run Autistic and Living the Dream. I'm kind of like a lead youth worker, wheelchair basketball coach, and I do community research on kind of disabled and autistic kind of experiences. My main interests at the moment are the intersections of being trans and autistic and our kind of lived experiences, because I'm trans, mass, non-binary and autistic. And also about kind of a lot of my community work at the moment is about disabled people's experiences of cancer treatment in order to make recommendations to the NHS. I am a large and charged, funky yet chunky white person with hair that desperately needs cutting. It's short, but it's long for me. It's driving me nuts. So I'm probably going to be playing with my fringe quite a lot today. I've got large, round, brown and orange glasses. I've got Simon's favourite green curtains in the background. He loves my green curtains. And I'm sitting on my usual light grey sofa on the corner. And also, something new for me, if people can see it, is my Aucademy t-shirt, which I've just bought a couple of days ago in burgundy, which is, it's got kind of gold Aucademy written over the top, and then it's got a gold infinity symbol underneath, so which can be bought on our bonfire. Sam, would you like to describe yourself physically and also tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Thank you very much. Difficult to follow. I find that this bit quite hard. So, Sam, Lord of Neurodive, which is my own sort of thing, so I'm allowed to be Lord of it. I use him, he, as my pronouns. I have quite a lumpy face. Years of sort of being battered on the rugby pitch, quite a flat nose. I have short hair. I've had a shave recently. I've got a bit of a mullet going on, but it's tied up. Keep the party in the back sort of thing. I'm wearing a ridiculously loud shirt for this time of the day. What else? Quite big ears. And they say ears and nose never stop growing. So by the time I'm like 70, this will be like an elephant. But there you go. What else? Is there anything else I need to mention? Probably not.
No, I think that's brilliant, Sam, if you're happy with that. Maybe Raven could do a physical description of herself next.
Sure. I'm Raven. I am a light brown person with long brown hair. It's quite very curly. Glasses, wearing a light floral top, and wrapped in a green blanket because it's cold in my room. I think that about covers it for a physical description.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what your, I don't necessarily use the term special interest, but your main interests are at the moment?
I have really big interests in, for one thing, in linguistics, which is kind of where what I'm going to talk about today came from, as well as Star Trek. I'm a huge nerd about Star Trek. And
what series is your favorite?
Deep Space Nine.
Oh, okay.
And I have more, but a lot of them tend to vary because I also have ADHD. But one of the longest lasting ones since I was a kid is airplanes.
Okay. Excellent.
And I'm also involved with the Want to Learn More Network, a trans education group here on Facebook and Discord.
Want to learn more? Is that Raven?
Want to learn more. WANNA. It's the informal spelling.
Want to learn more. Perfect. I'm going to look into that as soon as we've done this conversation. And that's on Facebook, yeah?
Yep. We have a
Perfect.
Facebook group, a Discord server, and a couple other community spaces.
Perfect. Excellent. And Niki, do you want to do a physical description and a little bit about what you're interested in?
So physically, I am brown, like a potato, actually, like an average potato. And I'm so Caribbean and European mix, if you can imagine that, in terms of my features. So I have a fringe of black hair coming to about my eyebrows and then exposing a large forehead on the other side, which I'm not happy with, but I can't seem to get the angle right. Yes, I've got an animal print. What animal is this again? Zebra, isn't it? Zebra, zebra. I've got zebra print shirt, and then behind me, I've got a gallery of stolen postcards, which are posing as pictures in frames. I'm rocking back and forward because I can't keep still. Which
no,
is really
I'm here
hard.
for it. That's fine. You move as much as you need. Yeah, I've got this. This is probably going to go in my mouth at some point. It's like a little rubbery stimmy thing with a little ball in the middle of it, which I've just recently refound. So that I'm sure there's going to be a lot of movement today. So rock away, my friend.
Too. I have something like that too, but my partner's dog licked it the other day, so I have to wash it before I can use it again.
Nasty.
Yeah, there's got to be a line there somewhere, I think, isn't it? It's not. It's not a whole family chew toy. Come on. So I don't know really where we wanted to start today. So presumably we're all ADHD because that would be quite a good start. In fact, actually, that reminds me of the other question I'm supposed to ask everyone is, when did you first find out that you were ADHD? Maybe I'll start again and we'll do the same. The words aren't wording today, but the same way we did it last time. So I am a late diagnosed person as autistic and OCD. I think it was when I first started working with the young people that I work with now, who are mostly autistic, ADHD, otherwise neurodivergent and disabled. I just thought, this is interesting. I do a lot of this. I like that as well. Okay. And it's because of that I thought, I think I need to go and explore what this means for me as a kind of 27-year-old person. And I think after kind of getting my head around being autistic, which I'm still kind of doing, if I'm honest, I find that there's other things that you peek under. Okay, now I've kind of understand my neurology a little bit. What does this say about my gender and sexuality? And I think neurology is in there again. So I thought, all these kind of really strange, what I would consider to be quite maladaptive coping strategies for myself, my own personal experience, was actually hiding the fact that my brain never stops going. And, and that's definitely an ADHD thing for me. So it's only recently in the last maybe year or two that I've thought that I am possibly ADHD. Sam, when did you kind of come to your ADHD realization?
Not dissimilar, actually, Katie, in some regards, because it was similarly working with children and young people who had that diagnosis, where I felt a bit of a connection and was able to kind of, I guess, empathise with them better than some of the other staff. I had never, before I started that work, I'd never even really heard of or understood what ADHD was. And then I kind of took to that work, developed some skills, started to put together training courses. I remember a few times giving presentation. I gave a presentation at CAMS once for an ADHD group, and one of the parents afterwards said, "Oh, it's so great to have, a good role model for our kids, someone that's had ADHD." And I was like, "What? No, what? I didn't say that." That wasn't the bit. So I was starting, and then it became a bit of a running joke at work, just because of my terrible admin and organisation. And then I started working with Aucademy after lockdown, and working with Chloe and a few others who were kind of assuming that I was neurodivergent and telling me that I was. So at that point, I thought, well, maybe I will, we'll look into that. Have to say, I'm unofficial. I'm not Facebook official, if you like, ADHD wise.
Uncertified.
So, mainly because I haven't paid anyone for it, as in I haven't had an official diagnosis, and I don't think I'd meet a criteria to get one on the NHS, which has been an interesting part of the journey for me, and something perhaps we can talk about later with the depathologizing, because when I did look into it, so because I'm not trained diagnostically, but I do support lots of families through the process, I have an understanding of the diagnostic process for autism and ADHD. And I started sort of downloading as much as I could and looking at some of the sheets that they would use. I think one was the DIR, which I think is an American one, or was it called something else? Anyway, I'm not good with the memory bit and the details. But the opening statement of it was a diagnosis is only possible if these traits have caused a negative impact socially or emotionally or something like that. And I immediately stopped and thought, well, from my perspective, I don't feel like they have. So why not? Do I not go down that path? Instead, I got a friend and colleague who's a doctor of psychology to do it, and so I could distance myself from the answers. She went through the process and she said, yes, you are definitely quite a lot. So it's not official, but it's sort of official, if that makes sense.
I think it's as official as it needs to be, Sam, really.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, I certainly, looking back and now sort of understanding it more and actually reflecting back on childhood, I was a nightmare at school for my teachers, especially my parents, always been very impulsive. And for me personally, I think I've been quite lucky to find outlets or things that have helped, which is why I can look back on it as not a negative thing about my personality. But equally, I've worked with lots of children and young people where I think because of the amount of punishment and correction they face early on, it's very hard for them to then connect that neurotype with a positive, especially when the systems around them do not support that neurotype to be successful easily. So anyway, sorry, that was
absolutely.
That's me.
And Raven, when did you first kind of realize you were ADHD?
So I was actually diagnosed with ADHD as a child, I think when I was in primary school, I think in 2007 or 2008. But at that time, despite my parents suspected a little bit that I might have been autistic at the time, but back then the DSM-4 at the time considered ADHD and autism mutually exclusive, so I couldn't have been diagnosed with both as a child until 2013 at the earliest. And then I discovered that I'm autistic not too long ago, actually. I think it was in 2020 during the pandemic that I started to figure some things out in that regard. And I got an official diagnosis in November of 2021.
Okay. And Niki, when did you first kind of realize you were ADHD?
Hang on a second. Hang on 1 second. There's a child coming down. Yeah. Okay, give me some time. I'm on a Zoom thing. Okay, sorry about that.
As long as they're your children or children known to you, that's not just a random.
Yeah, no. Yeah, sorry about that. Oh God, dog and child. Right, go away a minute. Yeah, right. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so it's mainly because of him. Yeah, that's how I discovered it. Because basically I'm 45 now. And as an adolescent and as a child, I was just sort of quite active and quite highly strung. This is what I was called as a child. Not now. Okay. Right. I can't talk with that. Right. Look, just wait. Sorry, I'm messing up the whole thing, aren't I?
Fine, darling. If you need to go and sort out.
No, it's fine. It's just PayPal credit. You can wait. Yeah, so you know what I mean? Yeah, always. So oh God, and the dog, get out. Come on, Sonny, out. Go on. Right, go. Right, sorry. Right, okay. Coming back to this, right. Yeah. So anyway, as a child, I was just highly strung, and then as a teenager, I was considered delinquent. That was my diagnosis. Bad, delinquent, causing trouble for everyone. I couldn't go to school from about 12, from age 12. I just kind of hit the streets really. So I was known to the police, the social services. Yet I came from this, middle class, stable family. So, no one could really work out why I was like it. No one, and in those days, no one really had any kind of way of working out. I was just bad. That was it. And so punished and things. I had a child at 14. I went off the rails. I took drugs. I did everything, reckless behaviour. So I just sort of carried that identity through my life. And then when I was about 16, I saw someone on the TV, breakfast TV, came on and talked about Asperger's. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I'm that. And so it wasn't until I was about sort of 19 that I thought, no, I'm definitely Asperger's. And then ADHD wasn't really a thing. It wasn't talked about at all. It sort of emerged in the 90s, and it was just boys, and they were just naughty boys, and that was it. And then, so Asperger's, and I remember first pronouncing the Asperger's identity to someone after a catastrophic social situation when I was about 23 after a party, and I said, I'm Asperger's, and they said, so am I. And that was probably the only time I ever spoke of it, and then just forgot about it over the years. In those days, people kind of weren't seeking a diagnosis or anything like that. It wasn't available. It's just something I had too much other stuff going on anyway, and I didn't want to add anything else to my identity because I was already all the things people said were bad, like single parent, poor, other things, and so I just kind of thought, just get on with life. And then my son, had a very similar life to me. He had a diagnosis of autism and ADHD, and then I thought I was sitting on a parenting ADHD course, probably similar to the ones that you run, Sam, and I thought, hang on a minute, like all of this applies to me completely. That's the explanation, for why I was so bad. And so I sought a diagnosis, got a diagnosis very, very easily because I did meet all of the criteria. Sam, I'm sure that you would be able to get an NHS diagnosis actually. I got that in 2020, and then I got the autistic diagnosis in June this year, both on the NHS because I still haven't got any money. So that's my journey. But I've been living with the identity of being autistic for many years, over 25 years. But that was it really.
What does it feel like to be kind of have that affirmation of, I don't know, did you feel affirmed?
Vindicated, completely vindicated. I feel so much more confident in myself. I feel as at last I can really rewrite that narrative and that identity that I've been carrying around like a kind of sack of kind of like a chain, really, like a ball and chain. And the other day I was at a family event, and one of my uncles always chimes up and reminds me how bad I was when I was a child. So I just spat it out. I came out as ADHD and autistic, and I said, well, that's actually what's happened, what was going on. And it shut the whole family up, and they all just hushed and went, oh right. And then they all started thinking, well, because they're all neurodivergent. And so a couple of them have diagnosis and things like that, or their children do at least. And so then a couple of others started piping up and going, oh, I'm autistic, so I was like, there we go. It starts the the healing of the family really, and it's all come up from my son, who has been lucky enough to have an earlier diagnosis. He doesn't feel lucky. He doesn't want that diagnosis. A bit like Sam's children. He's been out of school for many years, so for him it's all bad. But it's good that he's got it, because later on he'll be able to embrace it.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay.
That was a long one. Sorry.
No, that's fine. It's really, and it's really interesting as well, because obviously we all sit here, there's this kind of idea about autistic people and ADHD people and neurodivergent people having like the same interests and the same needs and the same strengths and the same whatever and the same background, and just having heard all four of our stories actually it just proves that is just completely and utterly incorrect. With that, actually, I mean, I don't know if anyone got round to having a look at the DSM at all, and perhaps I thought we could unpick that because the language in that is interesting. So I don't know if I'm not going to go around in a circle now. People just pop up with whatever you want to say. That's fine.
Well, I mean, I didn't have a look at the DSM. I Googled ADHD DSM criteria, and you get these lists, don't you, of the areas: impulsive, hyperactive, and inattentive, and they're pretty similar. And my impression is it's someone looking from the outside, ultimately, generally at a child. And the kinds of things that they're looking at are the things which annoy them, which upset their classroom. So, you're not ADHD until you cause someone else a problem, and no one will know that you're ADHD. So things like loses items needed to complete activities or tasks. Okay, but that's what's underneath that. So activities or tasks. What about also forgets friends' birthdays, forgets where you've put all of your things at home? What about the impact on you? Doctor's appointments, commitments, because you've overcommitted and you live in the moment, so you don't remember any of the things that you promised to do. Phone calls, like loads of other things that you lose, but they've only got items needed to complete activities or tasks. So they've only noticed that person is struggling because they've come to a lesson without a pencil or what have you. So already I could. It's so negative the way that this definition is, and it's so superficial and it's so external.
Just wanted to pick up on that because not only is it negative, it's unempathetic, isn't it? Because it's like often turns up without the stuff required for a task. Brackets probably feels quite shit about that as well. Like, it's not on purpose. They didn't do it to piss you off. They did it because they didn't remember. And actually, sometimes, I mean, the amount of times I've hurt my toe kicking a doorstep because I've lost my keys, phone, wallet, whatever it is, or left it somewhere. It's not fun. I don't enjoy it. I'm not doing it to annoy someone. My brain doesn't remember stuff like that. Or it didn't. I've had to kind of work on it. And again, those traits that you were talking about in the DSM, Niki, they all start with the word often as well, which confuses me a little bit. I don't know if there's some sort of psychological parameter for what often means, but it's quite a subjective word. Like often turns up without their stuff. Well, what does that even mean? Like that's a totally subjective thing, really.
Yeah, like more than 60% of the time. It's like it's quite a kind of artificial hoop to create for people to jump through in order to get this precious diagnosis, which then gets you access to so many things, psychological, maybe medical, whatever you need, support, money. So yeah, I think it's set up to identify failure and crisis, and it's set up to identify deficiency and disorder, as we know. And that's the whole problem with it, that you can't be successful and ADHD at the same time. That's just like the biggest kind of a misrepresentation of what ADHD really is, and I guess that's why we're here. One of them is fails using the word fails to focus on details and or makes thoughtless mistakes. So they're both failing and they're thoughtless. This person, there's so much in that, isn't there? Because it's all very judgmental.
Because of the way that it's framed, like such negative, judgmental language, it took me a long time to come around to seeing my ADHD as not something inherently negative. Like, I've known that I had it since I was pretty young, like elementary school, and it was only in like 2021, 2022 that I came up with started to come up with my own term for it and think of it in a non-pathological way. And
your term, what was that again?
The word that I invented for it was Pollyannic, from Greek roots, like meaning many thoughtism, essentially. Because I wanted something that better described my internal experience, and I feel like for a lot of folks, that's I think, a pretty accurate description of the internal experience. I can't speak for everybody, but that's my perception, at least.
I think you can speak for everyone. Like literally, like ADHD. So diminished attention span is another one. Everything that they put in the first bit about inattentiveness is generally because you're interested in everything, like literally everything. So I personally want to be an astronaut. The only thing I'm not interested in is football. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a pianist. I want to be a guitarist. I want to be a singer. I want to be an actor. I want to be a scientist. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a politician. Everything. And obviously,
and a rock concert on the moon. Then I think, by the sound of it,
exactly. You know what I'm saying? But then on the moon, and then in Brazil, and then it's like want to travel to every country. I want to do everything, and there's only one life, and so of course your attention is it's explosive. It's exploding in your mind. It's not distracted. It's not limited. It's not that your attention is small. It's that your attention is intense, and it's wide, and it's unable to. If anything, you're unable to filter attention interests, let's say, so that and then as well sensory input, and then as well new ideas, any of those things. You're unable to filter them, emotions, conversation at the same time, so that you're therefore perceived as maybe distractible or disinterested or so on. But actually, because the whole thing was like come up with an alternative name. I'm not really good at those kind of things. I'm not good at naming, full stop. But I thought, right, looking at definitions of things, I've come up with intensive and passionate soul person. And I like intensive. So it's an IPSP, because I like the fact that it's still got the same amount of syllables as ADHD, because I don't want to get rid of ADHD. I kind of like it. It's kind of stuck with me, ADHD. I'm an ADHDer. So it has to have 4 letters. And an IPSP now, and it's intensive from Latin intensivus, so that's intense, fervent, and great. I like that. And then it's also from intendere, which is also Latin. That's turn one's attention, strain or stretch, because it is a strain. And then passionate, because having or showing strong feelings or beliefs arising from intense feelings. And then soul is emotional intellectual energy or intensity. So it's all about just everything being so goddamn intense. It's like thoughts are intense, feelings are intense, passion is intense, conversation is intense, everything. You think you've got to get it out now. It's intense. Boredom is intense. Boredom is excruciating for us. It's a killer. That dopamine monster that will not be sated no matter what. The craving for an experience, and like reward deficiency. If there is anything that's deficient, it's the reward, the sense that you can't keep that dopamine going. That's intense. So for me, it's all around intensity.
Yeah, I would happen to agree with you, absolutely. And I think I had something to add on to what Raven was saying. Oh yeah, so what you were saying, Raven, about being like polyenic and having like multiple thoughts all the time, all day, every day, which is definitely my experience. I feel like and we can dig deeper into that. And yeah, absolutely. You go first, and then I'll add what I wanted to add to that.
I just want to give some context for like how I came around to creating this word. I was thinking about the language that we have to talk about autism. Like, I can call myself autistic rather than saying I have ASD, for example. And like, it's fine. Autism has its own name in a way that ADHD doesn't. ADHD traditionally has only had the initials. And so I was thinking about that and thinking, okay, is there a not linguistically awkward way that I can use identity first language to talk about this facet of my neurodivergence? And I realized that there really wasn't. Like, there's like referring to yourself as an ADHDer, which like I get that a lot of people like that and are comfortable with that. But I have a problem with the initials themselves because I don't consider my ADHD a disorder. And what I feel like when when I say that, a lot of people perceive that as me saying, like, I'm not disabled by it. And no, I absolutely am in pretty profound ways. But I also, I'm not comfortable with framing that aspect of my personhood as a disorder, because I don't think that I would be the same person that I am if I wasn't ADHD. Like, I don't think that my sense of humor would be the same. I don't think that my thought patterns would be the same. There's a lot of, I think, important things about me that I think would be fundamentally different if I were not polyanic, ADHD, whatever you want to call it.
I can pick up on that, so, with my pointing that way. I can pick up on that. So, like, I wrote down, because I'll forget everything I want to say. I'll still forget it anyway. But I wrote down, right. So the ADHD, actual attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is almost a generic description of many things. It doesn't have to be someone who has that underlying nature that we have. It could be someone who's had a brain injury. It could be someone who's on drugs. And it does say in the DSM, you know, you have to diagnose by process of exclusion. But really, if you're only looking at the disorder bits, then really you're not doing it by process of exclusion, because you need to look at the positives. You need to look at the nature. You need to look a lot deeper in order to be able to exclude brain injury, alcohol, you know, like drug, under the influence of drugs, other forms of mental health condition, and so on. So that's the kind of neurological bit that can be presented by someone, you know, in many circumstances. And then there's the bit that is the nature, which is the fleshy bit underneath, as you were saying, Raven, you know, who you are, you know, it's who you are and it's not what you have. Now, I have both. I feel like some days I'm ADHD, and the ADHD is high, the chemical bit, the biochemical bit, and it's higher on some days than others. It fluctuates, you know. So, and then other days it's more stable. So I had 3 days on my own, and I felt like, wow, the absence of ADHD apart from the nature. And then I've gone back to work, and I'm like, oh my God, from the morning, the first person I've spoken to, I'm like, oh God, it's glaringly obvious that that's back. You know, so it depends on the environment, doesn't it? And that goes for the children as well. So by looking at the other things, then we can say, right, this is what it is to be ADHD, and make it more positive. And there are loads of other things, like not bearing a grudge. I can tell that's shared by so many ADHDers. Like people that you kind of don't even remember what you're supposed to bear a grudge about half the time.
It's really hard for me to stay mad at people. I am forgiving almost to a fault.
To a fault, right? Because sometimes you need to bear the grudge, because you need to remember why that person did something that you shouldn't be hanging out with them anymore. But you don't remember. It's like, oh yeah, because you were in the moment, and you know, so much has gone on since then. I mean, we're busy on the toilet, aren't we?
I'm inclined to give endless second chances, and it's really a problem sometimes.
Yeah. And then there's that it's the innocence as well. We're generally quite innocent. We don't see barriers to problems generally. We tend to see only solutions. And people have this secret society where they're able to see all the barriers and all the unspoken things, all the nuances of why a thing can't happen. And all you can see is steps 1, 2, and 3. So I think we're pretty good at solving problems. We're pretty good at doing things which require multiple steps. It's just that a lot of the time we can't, because there are loads of barriers set there by frameworks, status quo, neurotypical frameworks, which say no, you can't do that. They can't tell you why a lot of the time. You just can't. Okay, you just
because
can't.
We've always done it this way. That's my favourite one.
We've
always done it this way. Oh, right, okay. We'll just carry on then, because you know nothing's ever changed in the last however many thousands of years we've lived this way. I just wanted to unpick something you were saying about the fact that it's almost like a process of elimination. And I think in the DSM it says something about, I can't remember the exact part of it, but it was about saying that it has to be ruled out that the ADHD behaviours are, I've got it here. Also, it's made clear that these symptoms do not occur during the course of psychosis or mental health crisis. And I know I mean, David Gray Hammond is probably screaming somewhere about this, and I just think it's just completely and utterly erases the experiences of, people with mental health issues or who experience psychosis and who also happen to be ADHD. Like, it would be interesting to see how difficult it is to be diagnosed, realized, or supported with experiencing both of those things.
There's a lot of diagnostic overshadowing. That's on both sides. So like once you're autistic or ADHD, then that's the answer to everything. Anything that happens, it's like, well, it's part of autism, part of ADHD. So you can't then have mental health problems. And same goes for if you have a mental health problem. It's like people will look at that first and they go, well, many people who are born as women or present as women will be dismissed as having anxiety or depression. That's quite a classic one. And ADHD will come later because you're not classically climbing across furniture necessarily, or culturally have been sort of.
Sorry to interrupt.
No,
I just
wanted go in
because I'll forget otherwise.
Yeah,
but to me, that's where the crux of the problem with the DSM is because it presents everything as a negativity. You don't get the diagnosis of someone who doesn't feel like they're struggling. And therefore, we don't get a differential of what is someone with ADHD who has good mental health and someone who's struggling with their mental health. And we just get this kind of palming off of, okay, they can't because they're ADHD, or it's just mental health. And we don't have any understanding of the two combined. And I think, that's, for me, there's a couple of things. I think, with any diagnostic, there needs to be a change towards highlighting strengths and opportunities as well as the very real challenges people face, because otherwise how can we talk to young people especially about positive identity when it's just so disordered in its language for a start? But also with ADHD, if you look at like the autistic diagnosis process, whilst some of the terminology still needs changing, it's still far too negative. It does focus on areas of difference that are, I think, correct, like, social difference, the way people process it, sensory information. With ADHD, the actual name is misleading. The actual words that we're looking at. I mean, Russell Barkley talks about it a lot, but ADHD essentially is that impulsivity of body or mind. And I really like that many thoughts definition because of that. For me, I connect it more to the word of wandering, just because I feel like I don't have lots of thoughts at once, but I'll go this way for a bit, then I'm over here, now I'm over here, now I'm back there again, but I'm at a different angle and I'm down a lay-by behind a hedge in a bush doing something I shouldn't, so it's kind of like, it's that kind of wandering around. And it's the same with my body. Like I don't go to the gym anymore. I exercise at home, but when I exercise now, I'll put together a PowerPoint, I'll do some emails, I'll do a little set of exercise, I'll do a bit of tidying. It's the only way I can get housework done is if I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I bounce around between different topics, different things that I'm doing throughout the day.
Thought bouncing, maybe.
Yeah.
But then there's the most powerful thing about ADHD for me, and that is hyperfocus and the productivity that you can get while you're in an episode of hyperfocus is almost sometimes superhuman. The things that you can achieve. So you spend a lot of it definitely is disabling for me, more so than being autistic. I think being autistic is much more of a social thing, and if I hang around with people who are also like me, then I don't really have a problem. But with as long as I don't hang around with people too often, even the best of people. But ADHD can be really disabling in so many ways. So like, but then you get these sparks of hyperfocus where you can change the world and you in such a short period of time. So I call it like 25-75% balance. So I spend about 75% of my time underachieving, what I consider underachieving, underproductive executive dysfunction, overwhelm, sensory overload, suffering with either boredom or burnout, or all those things which hold you back as and the fact that it's not considered a disability is, to me, is just like, that's major number one thing we need to change. It's much more of a disability to me than being autistic, I'd say. And then there's 25% of the time where I'm just like, I'm great. It's like, people look at you and they think, oh my God, look what you've done. And I think, yes, I'm great, but if only I could do this all the time, God knows what I'd be then. I'd blow my own mind. And so exactly, if only you could do it on command, because then I must bring in RSD. I read it in Attitude magazine when I first started really looking into ADHD for myself, and there was an article about 99% of ADHDers suffering with RSD. Now, RSD is so pervasive, right? It's in every single area of your life. It's like a trimming of it, like a trilogy of perfectionism, internal critic and imposter, criticism of others, low tolerance for imperfection of others even, and then the rejection sensitivity, your own and towards you from others. And so, rejection sensitivity could be somebody's tone of voice. I'm already criticizing myself now because I think I interrupted Raven earlier, and now I've got to deal with that later. Oh, was I good enough? Did I burst in when she was talking and then take away her stream? And it's that thing that holds you back inside, but all by yourself, that ADHDers have. And it limits our life chances, it limits our potential, it limits our achievement, it limits our finances, it limits so many things that actually you could probably describe most of the disability around RSD and take away all the other attention stuff, because that's all what inconveniences other people. And what would really help us if we had understanding and support of RSD, because knowing what RSD is has helped me to no end, because now I can go, right, I'm in the middle of an RSD attack, 72 hours, ride it, and then I won't even remember it anymore after that, apart from the perfectionism and the imposter and the internal critic, which are kind of always there. But there's overwhelming attacks where you can even go to the point of feeling, like harming yourself because it's over something like a comment, Anyway, I'll stop talking now.
Well, I think, sorry, Sam, you've not spoken much. I'll let you go first, and then I'll jump in after you, if that's all right. Oh, right, okay. What I will say, and I'm not coming to the DSM's, side here, but I was quite surprised, because it's been a while since I've last read it, because I'm the kind of person who reads these things for fun. They did actually make like several good points, despite the issue with not being able to diagnose with ADHD if you have psychosis, which I just think is completely and utterly inappropriate and wrong and quite harmful. It did go on to kind of make reference to that a lot of us feel peer rejection, and we get bullied and we're isolated at school and kind of educated. I was
bullied so much in middle school. It was bad. That's one of the things that I've experienced really a lot throughout middle school and high school. It got better in university when I got better friends, but that's real. Also, I wanted to add on something about RSD, like what Niki was talking about, that my perception, at least, is that it's not something that's specific to ADHD, because I see a lot of other folks who have different neurodivergences who also experience it. And I think that it's a trauma thing that it just happens to be incredibly common among ADHD folks, autistics, dyslexic people, that kind of thing. You're
right, but there's very rarely ADHD without RSD. So you're right in the sense that it's one of the things that holds us back the most. So yes, you've got this great drive, driven by a motor, talkative, maybe appear confident, but actually the RSD is crippling. It's so crippling.
It really is.
And so yes, other neurotypes do share it, but they could also be without it. Whereas I don't think any ADHDer, even based on the evidence that I read, 99%, almost no ADHDer gets through life. without
Because
the
there's
RSD.
not one of us that doesn't get rejected or reprimanded all the time from a young age.
But I just wanted to, because this is a really interesting one for me, because part of the difficulty, I think, for me and my own sort of identification is I really didn't connect with a lot of the struggles. I could empathise and hear people and try and support them and understand what that might be like. But for me, I always had that internal voice of, oh, that's probably your problem. So, you know, and I don't know where that comes from, and I'm really interested in it because, I wonder if, you know, I totally hear what you're saying, Niki, about how some of those elements can be disabling, but I do think that's because of the framework, the system that person experiences as a young person. And actually, if we focus more on including everybody that's in that neurotype, including those that maybe haven't had those struggles for certain reasons, we can identify what's better, you know. And again, a lot, it's an awful statistic you hear about the amount of undiagnosed people in prison systems. You know, that is something you hear about. But equally, I wonder how many undiagnosed entrepreneurs there are. And actually, are we actually looking at just something that is more common as a neurotype? We have the people that struggle because of whatever, you know, there's lots of reasons why people struggle. It's, you know, it's not just because of a diagnosis. It's your family, society, the situation you're in, the school you're in, the activities in your life. Like, again, for me, I do think I was very lucky. I think I owe my parents an awful lot, but equally I had sport, I had outlets, I had things where I could be a bit aggro, a bit impulsive, a bit rubbish at stuff. You know, I mean, as soon as I was on a rugby scholarship at a public school for 2 years, as soon as rugby season finished, they binned me off. They expelled me, told me to go home and not come back. I was expendable. But I got through most of it because of that kind of outlet and interest. So I don't know. I guess what I'm saying with the RSD.
Yeah, rejection sensitive dysphoria.
I get that trigger of, oh, you're not necessarily agreeing with me, or you don't like me in some way, but I also then have an instant kind of blanket of, you know,
yes.
it's not,
yes.
that's fine.
Yes.
And I don't know where we go to get that as such. And I don't know if it means that maybe if we had a wider sort of more positive diagnosis as well, we'd identify more where people with ADHD end up.
It's really difficult to unpick that one, isn't it? Because it most likely is a trauma response. At what stage in the life does trauma start? The thing is, what you're saying is that you had really good support and a loving family and really good environment and conditions, yet you still have elements of ADHD and RSD, or you are ADHD, but you have elements of the RSD as well. I'm the same. Like, I've really been really lucky. I've really loving family, you know. So I've been, you know, full of, but even the point is, even with all of that, then I have still got that to contend with. So for me, it feels much more, perfectionism seems to have been there since for as long as I can remember. It seems much more of a highly sensitive individual nature to me than trauma response. And actually, I've personally done really well under the circumstances. Like, I didn't have any high school, but still managed to get lots of, you know, qualifications and things like that. So yes, the ADHD has driven me. The hyperfocus has driven me. It's helped me. But I think the RSD, it's really interesting to know what the origins of that are.
Can I just throw a question in there as well then? Because, you know, as Chloe mentioned, you guys when we started, I don't identify with being autistic, although I know lots of and work with lots of autistic people, have done for years. And I just wonder where that crossover comes from. And again, it's difficult for me because sometimes I listen and think, well, maybe I'm just not ADHD because I don't connect with some of those experiences. So I think there's that. We still don't really know enough about that differential. You know, I read a piece the other day where someone was saying it was probably more common to have a dual diagnosis than a single. I can't remember where I read it. It was an advocate online that looked at lots of the research that's been done, and actually maybe it's more common to be able to, interesting what Raven was saying about how that didn't used to be possible in the DSM, and now here we are a bit further down the line, and we've got people sort of suggesting maybe it's more common.
Well, there's that theory that it's one neurotype, and there's just it's different types, different expressions of the same neurotype. There's that, and there are people that look at PDA and say that's a culmination of ADHD and being autistic as well. So, I mean, I think all of these are nascent. They're nascent discoveries. They're in their nascent stages. There's lots more to discover, isn't there? And mind, the work around mind is really immature. We don't have a great deal. We don't understand a great deal. And so our contributions are really valuable because we're identifying and kind of adding a new narrative to a lived experience which hasn't really been available, and it's sort of growing up like mushrooms from the ground, isn't it?
I think I just want to add to what Sam said, because I've never heard any other neurodivergent person say it before, so I'm very, very excited, because like when I was realizing that I was autistic, having thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to just throw away the DSM and anything else that uni that they want to throw at me, because I just think that's complete nonsense. And I want to hear from actually autistic people. And then I think, okay, so I understand the sensory thing, that fits with me. And I understand this, and that fits with me. But there are great swathes of things that do not fit with me. And it tends to be what would be considered kind of like the negative things. Like masking is not something I've ever done. And this is something I spoke about with Kieran Rose a couple of months ago on Aucademy. And I don't want to talk about it too much here, but I came up with an idea of autistic shielding, which makes a lot more sense for me, which I'll be talking about in a month or so's time. But like, I've never really masked. Like, this is me. I don't swear with the children that I work with. That's it. That's about as changeable as I come. I talk to my mum the same way I talk to my boss at work. I'm more intimate with my husband, obviously, but like my husband the same way I talk to, like everyone's the same. Like I'm Katie in every situation. And I don't feel the need to hide anything, because if people don't like it, then fuck you, basically. That's what I've always been like. I've always been like, if you have a problem with me, anybody, then that's your problem. It ain't none of my business. And I've always been very like that. And I don't know if it's because like I was part of a scout group that, on reflection, probably quite a lot of us were neurodivergent, or at least quite peculiar children. And then like you were saying, Sam, about kind of putting your energy into rugby and stuff. My goodness, did drama become my big thing when I was a kid, because I'm really good at accents, because I do accents all the time. I have no idea why, but sometimes I'm talking in strange accents, and you find the things that you enjoy, and that might be for you like being quite active and being quite sporty. For me, it was, I get to talk a lot on stage, and people are going to watch me, and they're actually going to be interested in what I get to say, and I get to wear weird costumes and do strange voices. Oh, sign me up. I'm here for that. I absolutely love that. But then I know a lot of autistic people who wouldn't go anywhere near public speaking, and it's just, I don't know if it's being both ADHD and autistic that just merges things so much that you almost don't feel like either.
This is what you were just saying is a perfect lead into what I wanted to say. Actually, I think that the experience of being both ADHD and autistic is a fundamentally different one than having either by itself. I think that in my personal experience, a lot of like my ADHD, before I figured out I was autistic, at least my ADHD did a lot to sort of kind of in some ways hide the like certain autistic traits, like or make them less obvious, like the way that I am about like routines and sameness doesn't, like, on its face necessarily look autistic, but what it does look like is somebody with ADHD who's also autistic.
Yeah, so picking up on that, Raven, I think that it's really interesting having done a drug experiment, because I just could, and so I had to try ADHD medication to see as an experiment firsthand. And a lot of the people I spoke to when my son was being diagnosed said, "Oh, no, we don't want to give him a diagnosis of ADHD because then we'll medicate him," as though I would have accepted that anyway. But we'll medicate him, and that will make him more autistic. And I didn't really know what they were talking about at the time. But when I took the drugs myself, I thought, right, what it's done is it suppressed my ADHD sociability, and therefore, what I'm left with is the things which are more obviously autistic. So, like, I don't really want to speak to anyone. I want to be on my own. I want to be left to just focus on the one thing which now my drugs are allowing me to focus on, and do it in an order. I'm much more committed to my order and routine once I'm medicated than once the medication wears off, or if I don't take it. So yes, it does. The ADHD is kind of like a really nice balance for the autistic side, because it gives you that that which you need to kind of overcome some of the limitations of the autistic side. Raven, you're saying, yeah, sorry, let me stop speaking.
This really resonates with me. Like, I find that when I'm on meds, that my autistic traits tend to show more than when I'm unmedicated. That's very much been my experience as well. Yeah,
you're just kind of left with, being autistic. It's like, okay.
And like there have even been times, my experience with ADHD meds, especially with stimulants, which I was on for a long time, is that they sometimes tend to suppress things, like aspects of my personality that I think are really positive and useful. Like, I often find, like, when I'm on stimulants, that I don't do like the creative associative thought patterns the same way that I do when I'm unmedicated. And there have been times actually in university where, like, I would intentionally skip my meds when I was about to write a big paper, because I knew that I would make connections more effectively in my writing if I didn't take my meds.
Yeah, so it kind of stifles creativity.
To my advantage.
Yeah, it stifles creativity. I feel like it's a little bit of an emotional straitjacket, which is good for me in the type of work that I do. I work in an institution as a midwife, so a lot of the time I'm required to behave in a certain way, and my impulsivity doesn't help me a lot of the time in that job. I overshare, I say inappropriate things, I butt in when people are speaking, so those things aren't useful when in my job. So the medication helps me to be emotionally more contained, and then appear more neurotypical. But like you say, Raven, like in terms of creativity, even compassion and warmth, those medications don't help with that. So it's nice to let that out when you need that, and just want to be yourself.
Another thing is that when I was still on stimulants, sometimes, like, if I had a date coming up or something, like, I would time it so that my meds would have worn off by the time I was on said date, so that I would, like, be my actual self and not feel, like, emotionally stifled while trying to connect with somebody.
Yeah, exactly. And so I have a bit of a kind of feeling, I don't want to upset anyone or offend anyone else, because I think it's really personal, but I have a kind of feeling that it's better, if possible, we don't medicate children before they know who they are, because I'm glad that I know my pre-medication self, so that I can say, right, this is how I am on medication, this is what it takes away from me, this is what it helps me with, and I can choose to take it. But if I didn't know my crazy self to its extremes, and haven't learned to kind of find my own ways to kind of manage myself, then I would not know myself unmedicated. And I think that there is a danger in that. But I know for some people, they have no choice, because they're so heavily punished, they're so heavily excluded, that medication's like a kind of a life jacket, you know, for them. But actually, we should be looking at changing the environment rather than changing the child, you know, a lot more. Like what happened with you, Sam? You know, you were chucked into sport, and you know, you were able to get rid of all of your impulsivity by running around a field and stuff like that. You know, it's the kind of thing you need to do a lot more with children that can't sit still. Don't make them sit still. Have a standing desk. You know,
I mean, I didn't get rid of all of it.
No, but you know what I mean. Enough so that you didn't end up in prison, basically. You know, or
and
whatever.
I think, like, you know, with that, that's something I talk about a lot. But it brings me on to education. Like, you know, regardless of whether medication is an option people want to explore or not, and I think that should be a really personal, informed journey, including the child. But why on earth are we prioritizing an education system above the fact whether someone needs to be medicated to fit within it? You need to be medicated to cope at school. The system changes, not let's put them on drugs to get them through something we're supposed to be providing. It's meant to be, an education is meant to be your right. You've got a right to an education. Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean I want to be drugged to get through it. And again, you know, it's from what I've read, and you know, it's not conclusive evidence, but they have really low rates of ADHD in a lot of the Scandinavian countries, and they have forest schools. So before the age of 12, every child spends the entire morning outdoors. Now, it doesn't make those children not ADHD, but what it does is it stops them displaying as many of the behaviors that get them diagnosed, medicated, and punished, and all the, you know, mental health spin off from that as well, I think. And I just think, again, by focusing not just on the stories of challenge, but also where we see the positive aspects of ADHD be allowed to thrive and what's got people there, we could put medication on a toolbox list, you know. But if you know, my child is very young, he's 2, it's quite hard to tell what his attention's like, but I'd say it's fairly small, and he does, you know, go from one thing to another. But I'm not, if he doesn't fit in with an education system, I personally won't choose that for him. I would try and find another system that can work for him, because for me, for too long, the paradigm around us as parents, as young people, especially neurodivergent people, is we prioritize education and the system that's in front of us over our own mental health or our family's health or our relationships with our kids. And I quite often say to parents, look, if getting your child to an education setting is costing you your relationship, put that first. We can figure the rest out later. So sorry, that's a bit of a random tangent, but
I think this. Sorry, if you finished, Sam. Or am I interrupting? No, we're all good. Yeah, it's just. I've now lost it. I think what society is, through the educational system, especially in the UK, and I have a feeling it's elsewhere as well, is what they're putting before anything else is not education but compliance. And that is an exceedingly worrying thing for young people you consider to be quite vulnerable. I have been exceedingly naive in things that have happened to me in the past, like worryingly so. You know, the trigger warnings and content warnings of that would be beyond ridiculous. So I think, you know, you know, if you're taught to be compliant, and that's a thing that we put on children who don't behave in the way that we want them to or expect them to or need them to, it basically says that people in authority over us have control of us. We have no autonomy. We have no choice. This is the way it's always been done, you know, or someone told me that that's the way it happens, and therefore that's what relationships look like. And my bugbear with education is the issues with relationship and sex education, you know, especially in light of kind of Section 28, which made it illegal for schools to talk about LGBTQ plus issues and identities. Like, there are still a multitude of disabled young people who, either because they're at a specialised school, are considered to be therefore genderless and sexless. Not that there's any problem with being agender or asexual. It's just a kind of blanket idea that they put over all disabled young people and adults.
Yeah.
And therefore that we don't need to be given the tools to spot red flags in other people and to understand what consent is, and and how important is that to teach non-speaking children how you get out of situations like that, or how you communicate to other people. Something's happened and I've not enjoyed that, and I've not liked that, and I didn't say yes to that. I think is beyond horrifying, actually, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I mean, that's going down.
Something I wanted to add about medication and my experiences with it is that since I switched to a non-stimulant medication, I've found it really interesting in that, like, it doesn't have some of the same, I feel, negative effects that stimulants did on me. Like, I feel more myself, and less emotionally suppressed than I did when I was on stimulants. And it's not as strong an effect. Like, it doesn't, it's not as powerful as far for executive dysfunction, for example, as being on a stimulant. But at the same time, I feel like it suppresses my personhood less. It's kind of a balance. Like, you can be on a med that doesn't suppress positive parts of you, or you can be on a med that works really well. But I haven't found that there is one that can do both.
Enter stage left, fast release. That's my answer to that one. I'm like, the ones I take are stimulants, but they last 3-4 hours. So I can go, right, I'm going to take this for the morning, get myself through that morning, because I know I'm going to have a lot of interference from outside and I'm not going to be able to be very effective. And so I'll do that. And then if I want to take it for the afternoon, I can. Or if I want to drop it for that afternoon, I can go back to, let it wear off and go back to being my crazy self, or whatever other self I am that day, RSD self, or, hyperfocus self, or what have you. So I like that. But I don't think medication is this magic, thing that it purports to be. It's like you say, Sam, it's one thing in a toolkit. And I do really think people should be supported as children, primarily with non-medication solutions as much as possible, medication as a last resort, rather than the first-line treatment. The first-line treatment for ADHD is nothing to do with that child. It's not to do with the child. Look at the side effects. Actually, even growth stunts growth by up to 2 centimeters. It's like so many things.
I have to wonder. I was on stimulants from a pretty young age. Like, I think I started taking them in 4th grade. And I also ended up, at least until I transitioned, being unusually short for my perceived gender. Like, I'm 5'4", which I think is 163 centimeters. Which for men is below average. And I have to wonder if being on medication from such a young age had something to do with it.
Well, that's evidence-based. There's quite a lot of studies out there to say that, you'd be right, in that it stunts growth. But then you're meant to have medication holidays so that it allows for some growth catch up. But the evidence isn't that strong, but there's lots of it from what I've read, which I think it should be used more with caution. But it was really hard to go back, isn't it, for you, because you've grown up with it. There was a really interesting Netflix documentary, wasn't there, called "Take Your Pills" or something like that. Have you seen it? It's quite biased. It's called, I think it's called "Take Your Pills." Worth a watch. It's probably a bit triggering actually for you, but it's quite biased, as in it's anti-medication really, but it also does reveal a lot about the pharmaceutical industry and the role in that, especially in places where there's money to be made from pharmaceuticals, and so the kind of the keenness to kind of use medication. But I don't know, it's a difficult one because, like I say, medication, ADHD is quite new really, isn't it? And so is medicating it. So we have to kind of look at it more as a variation of normal rather than, and try to get that in. And then medication will probably be less of a solution. because ADHD would be less of a problem then.
It should be if it's any form of the toolbox, it should be done with full choice and full understanding. Which I think, if the child's too young to appreciate that, then maybe that's your answer to whether you should medicate. If they're not able to take on board the risks and the benefits and what you're trying to achieve, and also, again, if the choice is, you're flunking school and you're in detention all the time, if you take this medication, you won't be flunking school and you won't get detentions. To me, that's not a reason, is it? It's the way you talked about it, Niki and Raven. You both talked about it in a way where you understood it in a rounded way, and you had to make your own decisions about what was best for your life. The child doesn't have that. It's literally like, do this or you're getting expelled. Well, what I don't know.
There's a lot of pressure put on parents. Sorry, go on.
Yeah,
definitely. Absolutely. I think when I was diagnosed and started medication, I don't think I really entirely understood what I had been diagnosed with, and like exactly why I was supposed to take those meds, and like they helped, but I didn't really get a lot of support otherwise, other than getting medication. I guess like maybe my parents never perceived that like I needed more support. I don't know.
Or there isn't more support available because
there wasn't much else available.
Because if people don't even know really what we're
talking, like I'm bashing parents in any way, because obviously their role in this as well. I think they're under supported to understand medication. Most parents have to go away and do their own research. They don't get the support to guide that decision, and equally they get certainly in the UK, they get the pressure from the systems to say, oh yeah, no, you've been given this medication, you should take it, it'll help them get through the door.
They get talked into it. They get told that if you don't do this for your child, then you're depriving your child of the chance to achieve and fit in and make, and have a future. I mean, which parent is going to be able to take that responsibility for themselves? Exactly. It's really, really big responsibility people take when we tone medication down, because there isn't another alternative. There isn't someone saying, we can offer you an ADHD coach for as long as you need it, that will be available for this amount of time, because there aren't really ADHD coaches funded, for one, and secondly, the knowledge isn't there. Like, where are the people like Sam in the NHS? Like, we need people who properly understand and who really have lived it. So, people with ADHD would be good, and who are trained then to work with, young people and adults as well. So just so that we've got an alternative. But that therapy isn't always the more expensive option, or therapy, I mean support, mentorship, whatever, coaching. It's always the more expensive option than meds, isn't it? Because meds can be produced relatively cheaply. And so, and we're don't forget, we're working from a medical model. We're in a system of medicine. Medicine only offers medicine. That's the solution to every problem. Is like, we've got some medicine for you, and so that's the reason why we're in this situation. I think with the medicine.
Yeah,
I have two things to add before we go completely past the point I wanted to add to something that Raven said about 5-10 minutes ago. I think also, like, the thing, I don't know your experience of this, and I'm not asking for any like particular personal info, but like the whole thing about like how we experience our being ADHD when our hormones are changing. Like, I feel like with children, that's definitely a thing, because obviously they're still working out, well, who they are is who they are, but they're still working out who the adult and more mature version of themselves is. And we do that throughout our lives anyways. But then add in hormones there, which affects your neurology, absolutely, and the behaviors that might come from that, and the mental health that may also come from that, and people's response to that. I think it's a really dicey thing, and I think if people are also on HRT as well for many various reasons that people might be, I would be interested to know if there's whether if someone was going through gender identity healthcare, whether that's a consideration for ADHD medication. I just wondered if you knew anything about that at all, Raven. That's sorry, this is going deep diving into an interest of mine.
No, that's you're totally fine. I never changed my meds when I started HRT and started medically transitioning. But what I will say is that my grades in university got a lot better after I started transitioning, and maybe that's because I think part of that's probably because I just wasn't miserable anymore. But also I do wonder if if that has something to do as well with with hormones. Yeah, if the changing hormonal profile affected my how I experience ADHD, and I think it did. I think that the improvement in my grades was probably a combination of not being miserable anymore and the nature of my ADHD changing with my transition.
Yeah, I just, as soon as you said whatever you said earlier, which I now can't remember, I thought, oh my goodness, I need to talk about hormones. And I think that's very true of children and children going into puberty and stuff. And it just seems it seems a tricky business
for sure
of suggesting
so sorry
and kind of high hormone or big hormone changes, whatever they may be. It just seems like tricky business for sure. There was something else I wanted to say and I've now forgotten.
Oh, sorry. Well, that's probably my fault. I just wanted to tag it back onto something that, I think you we spoke about at the start with the depathologizing, but the hang on, have I lost my train of thought now? Oh, ultimately that medical diagnostic is behavior based. It's about measuring a collection of behaviors. Now, a behavior is the what, isn't it? It's what someone does. It's not why. So when you throw all those other elements into the mix, self-esteem about who you are, a sense of belonging, medication, hormones, teenagers, it just becomes a bit of a mess, I think. And I think, again, for me, a way of maybe not depathologizing that definition, but a way of maybe making it more useful would be to anchor it more in experience. Why does someone forget all their stuff? Why do they do these things? Because someone could forget their stuff for 100 different reasons. But ultimately, if it's just that they have a neurotype where they might have thought about their stuff and then they thought about 10 different things at once and their stuff went to the bottom of the pile, it's a different, I think for me, that's
Sam, I was so all over that. All of looking through the DSM, I was like, yeah, but why is that person doing that though? We're not asking why, we're not looking underneath. That's just tip of the iceberg stuff. So the why gives us so much. It gives us all the answers and it gives us the solutions. So okay, if that person just lives in the moment, then and they forget stuff because they live in the moment, or they forget stuff because they are distracted or whatever, then we can look at that person's individual experience and say, well, what would help you? For me, the key hook is a lifesaver. That saved me hours and hours and hours. And I religiously, even if I'm walking from one room to another, because my hand is no good, my hand has no memory. I put my stuff down and I don't remember it was even in my hand. You know what I'm saying? Right? So now, even if I'm going from one room to another, that key goes onto the key hook. The moment it leaves my hand, that's the only place it's allowed to go. I've found my keys in the fridge. I found my keys underneath the bed, all kinds of places. And I have no recollection of anything. And so it is about looking at what's underneath the behavior. And it isn't a behavioral disorder. It's a neurological type. And this is what a lot of people mistake it for. And it's, I still hear GPs say, behavioral disorder. And I think it's not. And then we use behaviorism as a response, don't we? Behavioral strategies. It's like you can't train this out of a person. But you can help them to learn how to manage themselves so that their life is more fulfilling and they waste less of their energy struggling with things which they could streamline yourself. But that's the case for any neurotype. It's just that our neurotypes are less recognized. We're at the ends of a bell curve, aren't we? People who can access more of the things which are kind of easier for a larger group of people. You know, we sit at either end of those. In terms of hormones and medication, there is definitely an interaction. There's definitely interaction. Hormone regimes, medication regimes need to be adjusted to account for hormonal fluctuations. That needs to be recognised. There is some, again, scanty evidence that that's the case, but most certainly, and that's what makes me think that ADHD is almost a kind of biochemical type of thing, as well as a way of being. It has a kind of, it has a neurological, like the dopamine reuptake inhibitor, that is the stimulant medication. Dopamine's neurotransmitter, right? So noradrenaline and so on. They're neurotransmitters, and we've got evidence about them. The neurotransmitter, which is an actual chemical substance not traveling right down the neurological pathway, being taken up too quickly, so that the person is unable to sustain the attention or the level of dopamine they would need to execute a number of different tasks. So if that's not effective once hormonal treatment or hormonal fluctuation is present, then we need to definitely take account of that and address it with changes in regime. That's just the answer to that.
Because I've got to say, as a person, sorry, Sam.
I was just going to say that for me that understanding why is such a better pathway to positive change. I mean, again, I've only recently gone through it personally, but someone asked me, has thinking of yourself in that way changed much? Has it helped? And again, that was difficult because I didn't feel like I needed help in the first place. I was just interested. But actually, what it does do, I am working on things more, if anything. It's not an excuse. It's not me. I'm not going to say, oh, well, I've got ADHD, so I'll never get there now. But because I understand why, it's easier for me to figure out a solution. And it doesn't feel like I'm being wrong or I'm just wrong for being me. And again, that whole reinforcement bollocks, which is, sorry for swearing, but it's based on no empirical research of any value that reinforcing and punishing behavior actually changes it anyway. Because equally, you can tell someone with ADHD not to do that 100 times. If they can't override the impulse in the moment, it's just punishing them for a skill that they haven't acquired yet. And I don't always like looking at it as disordered, but one of the things Russell Barkley talks about is identifying the really core executive functioning skill of impulse control, of inhibition, and that mind's break. And without that in place, all your impulsivity comes through, and you've done something before you've really assessed it anyway. So if you've had another thought, so that many thoughtedness, the argument is that everybody has those distractions, those thoughts, but most neurotypical people will put a brake on and kind of go back to what they were supposed to be doing. Whereas for ADHD, it's there's no inhibition, there's no mind break, there's no body break. You just go.
All the thoughts there, and it's recognized.
So I hadn't quite finished that.
Sorry.
And if you stifle that and you don't have an output, you are equally kind of changing yourself to fit something. So it's that balance, isn't it? It's that I know I'm too impulsive, and I know that sometimes that could cause me problems. So I try and work on it. But equally, because I know that at my core and essence, I will always be impulsive, I find outlets for it, places I can be impulsive and not work. And it's that balance rather than, oh, you're too impulsive. So when you are impulsive, we'll punish you for it in the hope that you stop it. And
or you punish yourself for it, and then going forward, don't you? But that's the thing, it's all about context, isn't it? So in the context of understanding why you are like it, then it's no longer a negative. It's no longer a problem. It's now something just to recognize, observe and recognize, and use either to your advantage or learn to manage for yourself, or put yourself into the right, or change your own environment, or what I mean. So that's the way to positively grow in terms of identity and life experience as someone who is neurodivergent. I'd say so. It's really it's that is it, isn't it? That's the way forward. We've coined it. We've solved it. You just need to write the document now and copyright it, and there you go.
Yeah. I wonder if I may. I think it goes with what we've all been saying, but what Raven was saying about the use of the word polyanic and about kind of being the idea of many thoughtism. I've started using attention hyperactive for my own experience of ADHD, because I just feel like disorder and deficit just need to be kicked into the sea. Like it doesn't fit with me. I don't think it fits with a lot of us. I think it's subjective, and I think it's like you've been saying, Niki, about the fact that it's about how others perceive us, and whether basically we're a pain in the ass to other people. And that's why attention hyperactivity means for me, I've literally just chucked out the deficit, chucked out the disorder, and because I think for me that's what I am. I'm not energetic like the young ADHD boys that I work with, but this never stops. This is all day long, and it's not like one train of thought. There's like this train and that train and a fucking helicopter and a speed.
It's an idea surplus, not attention deficit.
That's it. That's the thing, isn't it? It's an excess of ideas.
Yeah.
For my, go ahead. No, go ahead. Finish what you were saying.
Oh yeah, I think that's all I was saying basically. That so now I use attention hyperactive, which explains my experience, but might not explain others' experiences. So if we're trying to depathologize ADHD, but we're also not all one person, obviously. We've got intersections in there and various other things going on. Like, how do we come up with a word or a phrasing or a framework of what, attention hyperactivity or polyenic or ADHD actually is? It's
right. So on that, I know you guys are focusing mainly attention, but I looked at your definitions and I thought they're good, but still, for me, it's so much more than just attention or thought. Even it's much more than that. It's a whole body, whole person experience, and so I'm like,
I totally agree.
It needs to be something else in there. That's why I went for like intense and passion.
Well, the impulsivity, I think, has got to be in there, because to me, the reason that's not in there, but is again, it's the same differentiation they used to have with the ADD, ADHD. Like the ADHD is the impulsivity of the body. The ADD is that internal mind wandering, but it's still at its core, I think, is impulsivity, because
can you mute me? Sorry.
Those distractions. It's just that usually they manage them, whereas we don't. We're kind of not incapable, but we're just more inclined to go with whatever our mind brings up. But that's not always a bad thing. It's just a thing.
So strictly speaking, when I was diagnosed with ADD, which is now ADHD and attentive type, according to the DSM. And I've never really, except like on rare occasions, had like the physical hyperactivity thing. My experience is much more an internal one. And so, like, something else that I wanted to say is like, my goal, I guess, with for how I conceive of my neurodivergence is that I try and my goal is to like be neutral about it, I suppose. Like it's not inherently good or bad. It's just part of who I am, and like it's mine to deal with, but it's not like disordered or bad or wrong. It's like disabling, sure, but I feel like I wouldn't be who I was without these things, and that makes me uncomfortable with thinking of them like in a pathologizing way. Like, I'm not going to call them superpowers or anything like that, though there are like aspects in which they can be, but I also I aim to just see them to just conceive of them as neutral, Yeah,
it's not something to treat or get rid of, is it?
No value judgment either way, positive or negative.
Yeah, exactly. It's not an illness. It's not something that you want to get rid of, suppress. But at the same time, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh no, this is fine. It's completely different. It's completely the same as everyone else. It's just a difference, because actually there are many things about it. Some days I just think, God damn, the times when I've left my money in the card machine, or just like the other day when I left something on top of the car that I need. It's just like times where I just think, oh no, or forgetting to pay bills, or getting myself into all sorts of scrapes as a young person because of impulsivity and innocence and gullibility, blah blah blah. So I don't want to take that away from people, because that would be almost the kind of normalizing. I want to normalize it without taking away from the fact that those people require extra support. A lot of the time, because there is definitely a great big need for understanding and support, and adaptations and accommodations. I'd say I want to. So we've got to kind of try and keep some of the negatives, let's say, I don't know, or the pathology, without making it all about the pathology. So
I guess every person, though, every neurotype has its strengths and weaknesses, has its strengths and challenges. And I just think, again, the balance to bring to the DSM is not necessarily to take away those challenges, but add in some of the areas of that person might have strengths, and also ways to facilitate them. Because, again, I think a lot of the reason, not all, but, a lot of the reason that some of those deficits, as they're called, are so disabling is because the system is designed to fit people that don't have them. So again, that whole reinforcement idea that has just infested our practices with children over the last 200 years, that if someone doesn't do something, you can upskill them by just punishing them until they do it. It's completely false. It's not based on anything we know about humans, really. Skinner did most of his work on flipping rats. Not rats.
No, exactly. It doesn't work. It doesn't work on people in prison. Punishment doesn't work on people. It doesn't work on. It doesn't work. Full stop. But at the same,
if you've got a cognitive difference, it's not going to work. And even when it does work, that's when we get masking. That's when we get people that are afraid to do things that might help them because it doesn't fit. It's not right. It's not something they can do in that environment. So, to me, the balance would be maybe not taking away all of the difficulties, but adding in some of those areas, and also, I guess, offering people more varieties of ways to live their life that are not fitting those people with focused attention.
I actually think that is a very nice way to kind of round off what we've said. I know that Sam and I both have other things to get onto in a little while. So did anyone want to add any kind of final thoughts before I have my last two questions?
No, sorry about all the noise though, with the dog and everything in my house.
That's fine. It's like the inside of my brain anyway. So I can just see it now.
Just to add, really enjoyed talking to you all. It was awesome. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so have I.
Yeah, same.
Really
Same.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No one listening did.
You know what? It was lovely, but it wasn't nearly as scary as I thought it was going to be. So I'm glad I did this brave thing, because Chloe's been asking me for ages, and I've been like, no, too shy. So I just wanted to do this just to get over the fear, really, and not live in fear. And so thank you guys for allowing me to run my mouth for an hour and a half.
Delights me that y'all appreciate the word that I created, because it's
a cool word.
I created it for myself, but also for other people. I want other people to like it and to find it useful for themselves.
Okay. Have you written about this anywhere, Raven, at all, that you might want to share with us?
I haven't really written about it in any sort of formal way. I've talked about it with a lot of my friends, and I've talked about it in the Want to Learn More network spaces, particularly on our Discord server before.
Okay.
But I've never published anything formal about the word. I've just used it online and told people about it that way mostly.
Okay, because if someone such as me might want to talk about it online, I would just obviously really love to be able to kind of tag you in there. So how would I go about doing that? Or shall we talk about that once we've done our recording?
My Facebook profile is pretty locked down for for obvious reasons, really. But if you wanted to cite me,
Yep.
you can you can just cite me by my name, Raven Cochrane, and that I work with the Want to Learn More network. That's the easiest way to find me online, I think.
Perfect.
To
That's fine.
to find me through that organization.
Okay, excellent, perfect. Right, and that leads me to thank you very much for coming today. You've all brought some really interesting ideas and I feel like if we didn't have lives and other things to do, that we could have been talking for quite a lot longer than that. And I obviously would be really happy to have Sam. Sorry, I know you've been here a couple of times before, but all of us back on again to talk about ADHD or anything really, actually. So, but what's my final questions, Ben? Come on. Oh, what is your current favourite or new stim? And we'll start with Sam.
I don't know if I fidget. It's usually still blue tack when I'm doing presentations. Stim.
And fidgeting counts, I think.
That is it.
Yeah.
Blue tack
It's just always fidgeting then.
Yeah. Were you the kid? You know what I used to do at school? I used to put glue on my hands and then pick it off.
Yeah. Well, I used to cut lines of different coloured chalk and snort it to see what colour my bogies were. So yeah, that's right there for you.
That's
delighted
science.
my science
Hard
teacher.
Science.
I think it is science. You're right, and it's hard science, hardcore
That's
science.
it. That's what I'm saying.
Street science.
Raven, what's your current kind of favourite stim, or if you've got a new one?
I think my favorite overall, biggest for me, is music. I have a 5-hour playlist of stimmy music on my Spotify. Aside from that, I think probably flapping.
Yeah. Classic. Oldie but goldie.
Yep.
And Niki, what's your favourite current stim?
Oh, do you know what? When somebody asks me my favourite something, I'm like, I can't do one favourite. I've got a top 3. So
top 3,
so it's chewing, rocking, and singing, much to the chagrin of all the people around me. No one wants to hear me sing.
Also, the chewing's got to affect your singing a little bit. You don't, that's
chewing, rock, sing at the same time. Yeah. I haven't tried that actually, Sam, but I might try that in public for fun.
And the most important question of today, which I feel like is going to have some controversial answers, is what is your favourite form of potato? Now, we have this question because Ben, who's our wonderful kind of admin tech person today, is usually, if he comes on to Aucademy to talk, he's usually, I don't know what you'd call it, a filter, like a potato filter. He's wearing headphones, which is really super cute. So we always ask people now, what is your favourite form of potato? And I'm going to start with, I'll start with Sam again.
I know I'm going to cause offence, but I've got to be honest. I just have a complete lack. I'm just apathetic about potatoes. They have no relevance to me in life, in the meal particularly. I mean, I could eat them mashed. I could eat them, but that's false information scrolling along the bottom. I'm not a hater. I'm ambivalent. Whatever.
He doesn't hate you, Ben. He just doesn't care about you.
Strong feelings either way about potato, which was not a sentence I ever thought I'd have to say out loud quite so forcefully. You can chip them, you can fry them, you can mash them. They're equally bland in all facets.
Oh, unbelievable!
Because you've got to have them with sauce or cheese.
How dare?
That's offensive. Right, go on then, Raven. If you can talk through the range.
Honestly, I don't think that I can pick a favorite form of potato. I think I love them all equally, except for potato salad. I don't like potato salad. It's too cold.
You're just doing this to make me look bad.
Yeah, potato connoisseurs.
Yeah, so Raven can come back on again.
I have a lot of family that comes from potato Europe. North Central Europe. Have you ever seen that graphic that divides Europe into tomato Europe and potato Europe?
No, but I love it.
All all the European branches of my family come from potato Europe.
Nice. I like that. That's good. It's good ancestry. And Niki, what's your favourite form of potato?
Do you know what? It's not the form of the potato that counts, it's the type of the potato. It's Maribel potato. The Maribel potato, I'm sorry, but if anyone can get their hands on it in Asda, I'm sorry, Raven, then you've got to try Maribel. Sorry, Sam, go out, get yourself Maribel potatoes from Asda, and it will change your mind and your relationship with potatoes. It's nice chipped, it's like nice mashed, it's nice baked, yeah, with Lurpak, obviously. So yeah, Ben,
I didn't even know
you can thank me later.
Didn't even know they had different types. I thought they were all just
the
same.
Maribel is the one.
I thought King Edward just invented the potato, and I didn't know they had different types. They look exactly the same, taste exactly the same.
Oh dear, Sam, Dad, dear, oh dear.
Right, on that bombshell, I suppose we better say goodbye.
Bye.
We'll just wave awkwardly. Bye, thanks for being with
Bye,
us.
everybody.
Wave until the music starts.
Right, I think I smell pancakes cooking, so I'm going to hop off.
Oh, perfect. That sounds brilliant. See you later.
Well.